Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker. And before we get into it, I would like to point out that my mustache is growing quite nicely a couple days in. And this is part of the Movember campaign. So during the month of November, you can help Movember by having a conversation with a man or a person near you about their mental and physical health. If you'd like to support, you can also go to the podcast page and make a donation or get yourself moving for Movember. Now, I have Ed Eppley here, and Ed is coming in from the U.S. I'm going to ask him to describe himself very soon. And amongst other things, he's an author, he's a podcaster, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, the Ed Eppley experience. In fact, if you are listening to the podcast right now, I'd even say press pause on this right now, jump over, look up the Ed Eppley experience and subscribe to that, because he has amazing conversations with entrepreneurs. And he has these little mini logs, which are like 5-minute, little spiels, which are always on point. So I think maybe the takeaway from this right now is just to stop what you're doing, stop listening and jump over there. But in case you stay here, Ed, welcome to the conversation. I'm so delighted to have you here. Can you maybe share with us, Ed, what is it that you do and why do you do what you do?
Yeah. What my job is to help principally executive teams advance, and as they advance, the business should be able to make progress more quickly than would it otherwise, and usually with less collateral damage, unintended consequences that would come with that. The work I do is really around three sides of a triangle. If you think across the base of the triangle, it's the behavior that individuals and teams bring to whatever they do. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But then the one side of the triangle is the smart side of the business, which is really about the, if you will, the technology, finance, strategy, structure that the organization needs to have in place and implement in order to scale the business profitably. And then the other side of the triangle is the health of the organization, which is really the culture. It's minimal politics. It's low voluntary turnover, especially of the high potential people, and clarity and lack of confusion that typically goes along with most organizations. So the role that I play is helping the executive team understand which sides of the triangle are most important, most pressing for them right now. And then what I find is when we do work in those areas, people generally want me around after the fact when we've made progress, because I help, in your parlance, I help simplify complex scenarios. I help the executive, the CEO, the managing director, whoever the person is in charge, to know whether she or he has the right talent around the table to allow them to get to where they're trying to go. And the last thing I do is that tends to make me sticky with organizations is I help them have courage. I help the team or the executive to have courage to make decisions or to take action they already know they should take.
And how do you do this? Are these like workshops, programs, coaching?
Yeah, it's when my wife really gets frustrated with me, Chris, because she says, you're a coach. I said, no, I'm not a coach. I said, I don't set out with a plan for improvement for an individual. I'm a passionate golfer, and so I take golf lessons frequently, and I think of that person as a teacher is very much a coach, because they're trying to improve performance. I don't want responsibility for that. So what I do is I'm very good at holding up the mirror to executives. I'm very good at asking questions, not unlike what a lawyer would do, or a priest, or a man of the cloth or woman of the cloth. So I'm good at making people think about what are the consequences that they're getting versus the ones that they want. What are the outcomes they're getting versus the ones they want? And if what they're doing is not getting the right outcomes, I help them think through, well, if they do A versus B versus C, what outcomes come with that and which one's most preferable? As you know, most business people are not faced with right and wrong choices. They are faced with choices of which sucks less. And part of this, or which sucks the best, if you will. And so my job is to help them think about that. And again, not be not waiting to take action that in most cases things would only get worse if they wait. So hopefully that helps
Yeah,
answer it.
the choices between what sucks the best. And during this Corona time, there's a lot of options that suck. And I think you're looking for those that suck the best. So, Ed, why do you do this? Like, what is it about you that drives you to be that human mirror for these leaders?
It is my purpose. It's what I was built for. I believe it's what I was put here for, is to do this work. It took me the first half of my business career till I was 40 to figure out what I was good at doing, what was intuitive for me, and what I enjoyed doing, and what I could get paid to do. I pursued that by leaving corporate life at age 40 to go to work as an independent contractor for the local franchisee for Dale Carnegie Training. I had been teaching Dale Carnegie training courses since I was 25. So for 15 years, I'd been teaching those on an avocational level, but I came to realize I was good at it. I came to realize that people valued it when I did it. I could make money at it. So I pursued that full time. And that resulted in me not only becoming really good at it within the Carnegie organization, but to the point that I ended up buying franchises with another individual. And we became the largest Dale Carnegie training franchisee for the United States, second largest in the world out of about 150 entities. But I also came to realize that the model was flawed that we were operating under. We sold our franchises in 2010, and I dedicated myself since then to really just honing my craft and doing this. So I do it because I'm supposed to. I do it because I'm really good at it. I tend to get tremendous intrinsic reward from it because I am forced to continue to grow and learn to keep up with my clients. And I am I'm one of those people that if I read something today, I use it today with a client. Mm-hmm. I don't have to wait to test it. I mean, if it resonates with me, I introduce it into whatever I'm discussing with whoever I talk to.
So Ed, I'm gonna have to challenge back a little bit because you're saying that you're so good at all this, but you have surrounded yourself with a community of disturbed individuals. Can you reconcile that for me? You know, the irony of your expertise and this gaggle of disturbed people for which I'm proudly one of. How does that work out?
Well, yeah, I'm going for quality, not quantity, Chris.
Okay.
I like to say that the people who follow me on LinkedIn, that listen to my podcast or mini logs, read my blogs, they are a small disturbed group of followers, and they need an outlet. They need somebody who speaks the language that they want to talk in or talk through. And if I'm anything, I'm practical. And so the work that I do gets oriented around, if it's not practical, I don't care how theoretically correct it is. If I can't use it in the world in which I operate, it doesn't matter, right? It could be theoretically correct. So most of the things that I do are based around having either made the mistakes that go with learning what is practical versus what isn't, or in being around people who've attempted to do some other things and found what was practical and what was not. And so I revert to that practical. And so my disturbed following is based upon people having a common DNA that it has to be practical. If it isn't, it's interesting, but it doesn't really provide the value that they want.
No, and I think that's what drives me to simplicity so strongly is, working with large organizations in particularly in technology areas. There can be a lot of hobbyism and other reasons to, go down strange paths and really avoid the question of, if it's easy, what does it look like? Because that's a question we just don't ask nearly enough.
Yeah.
There was a mini log recently in the last week or days about decision-making, time management around important and urgent. And again, for people listening, you should press pause, jump over there, find that one. Those are not new lessons, but it was also so refreshing to just get it slapped in my face. And when the podcast is really an intimate thing that you're in my ears, in my head, and you're like, yeah, okay, okay, this is a reminder I need to right now. And that's what I really appreciate about your messages. So thank you for that. How would you describe this, this following of disturbed people? Like what are the characteristics? Like are these all Fortune 500 CEOs, or is it what's the demographic there?
It's the avatar is somebody who is managing and leading other people, and I define a manager as someone who has to produce results working through others. So it's not going to be from their own efforts that they produce the results that are expected. So they are managing and leading other people. They probably are very comfortable with the premise of the three sides of the triangle that I talked about: smart, healthy, and behavior, that basically is exhibited. And regardless of whether you're working on smart or healthy, there's a behavior exhibit and the consequences of that behavior. So they buy into that theory. And then I think the other premise would be that they're probably pretty curious people. I think intellectually they may not spend huge amounts of time like you or I do in terms of reading and skimming, maybe not reading, but skimming and looking for other ideas that are important to us for whatever reasons, personally or professionally. But they're curious enough that they're not locked into that there is only one way to do something. Mm-hmm. And if somebody can hold up either a reminder of something that they know they should do that they've forgotten, or a variation of something else that they've heard that might be an improved version, or even something new, they're open to it and they're not going to fight it. And they're at least going to gnaw on it and see whether or not it tastes good.
So what would the pain be that they're suffering from that would trigger them to call Ed? That they're open, they're already aware of the smart and healthy. That they're hungry, they're probably snacking already. What is the itch that they need to scratch that you could help them with?
It's usually significant transition, and it's change in leadership. It could be a change in several members of the team. So I've a CEO or managing director that I've worked with in the past will reintroduce me to the team when they've had 2 or 3 people that have changed out. They're going, okay, this is a new team. Even though 3/4 of us have been here for 5 years, we got 2 new players, 3 new players. You and I both know that's a new team.
Yeah.
So we got work to do, and they know that I'm not going to stay longer than I need to. I'm not looking for engagements that go on infinitely. I'm there for my time, and then I can step out. So they're comfortable with that. I think the other one is change outside the business. So markets that are disrupted. When a market's disrupted, when a legacy customer or something gets disintermediation takes place, and we have to shift, pivot, move quickly. Well, the number one issue that you have to have there is full alignment of the team, the executive team, about what that pivot's going to look like. But more importantly, how will we communicate that, and how do we show up unified about that to the rest of the organization? As you know, that's not necessarily quick and simple to get to, but every day that you show up as not aligned and cohesive about whatever the shift or the pivot is, it just causes tremendous additional time and energy and frankly cost that the organization is going to have to go through to get to where it wants to go.
And it's amazing that you can almost smell it when you walk into an organization, that if you've got a leadership team that's in sync and in flow and in the groove, as opposed to not.
Yeah. I think you can feel it. Yeah. I think you smell it. I think it's sensory. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So Ed, to put you on the spot, maybe Corona, COVID, that is a bit of an external influence these days.
Yep.
Changing the context of every organization. It's either in their favor, they're on the winning side or losing side.
Tomb or boom.
Exactly. What can a leadership group do practically to stay together and stay cohesive during this completely crazy time?
Well, recognizing that you're in Europe, you're recognizing that we may have listeners that are in various parts of the world, not just North America. First of all, you certainly have to be aware of what is possible. And depending upon where you are geographically, there are different standards and expectations for behavior. And so you've got to, first of all, recognize what are those. I think the second recognition is this will end. So the question, and what I mean by end, the version of lockdowns and constraints that we're having to operate in, artificial constraints, I would call them, that is going to be temporary. Whether it's, I don't think anybody's expecting it to be done in 3 months. The question is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it 24? Somewhere in there, we're going to get back to more likely business as normal. That's the other piece is, so for your geographic location and your size of business, what's that likelihood of that horizon look like? Having said all of that, then that really comes back to every day you stay apart as a team, where you're not in each other's physical presence, where you're only using the different virtual platforms to stay connected. There is certain kinds of work that you have to do over and above the business to stay cohesive, aligned, and connected. And there is even more work that has to go on if you want the creative combustion that comes from being in each other's presence organically every day like you normally would be. So that work looks different if you're an organization of 30 people versus if you're an organization of 300 versus if you're an organization of 3,000. But the bigger the organization, the less likely it is that the executive team will want to spend the time doing that work of staying connected as a team. Because they'll be pulled in doing so many other things that could be rationalized as important, but and urgent instead of that which is important and not urgent.
Yeah. And is there a tactic to stay connected? Is that just have a beer together, or is that a, can you put some structure on that? I know it really is contextual, but I'm just curious if you have a favorite tip.
I think it gets as elementary, as basic as we have to write down and agree upon almost a pyramid scheme of who we're going to intentionally reach out to, who's not expecting to hear from us. And we're going to say, how are you? I mean, what's going on in your life? And this is not about business, but just give me 5 minutes of the overview of what's Chris Parker's life like right now. And all you're doing is demonstrating, as Dale Carnegie would have said, sincere, genuine interest in the other person, which is everybody wants to be important. And just the fact that you would take the time is in demonstrating that you view them as important. So one, there has to be a real concerted effort to do that, both within this team, but also below you in the organization. And the second piece is there's an emotional intelligence that goes with that, which when you hear something, then you need to act on that appropriately. And in some cases, it's just to listen. In some cases, it's to say, do you want help? In some cases, it would be to offer resources, but you get the idea. Is that I tend to be low emotional intelligence in the sense that I can pick up what other people are sending, but a lot of times I don't want to care about it. And with COVID, I think we have to care.
How is it that you don't want to care about it? It seems like your business is in the business of caring for these people. Well,
it makes sense that I would want to care about whatever my managing director wants, whatever's on their mind. I'm going to care about that because it's in my best interest to do so. But if that managing director doesn't want to do the work that should be done to improve either their circumstances or the organization's, well, there's a point at which I'm going, well, I understand that you think that's an issue, but if you're not willing to carry out your part of the bargain, why should I care?
Yeah. And it's basically a relationship building there. It's having each other's back. It's being there. I guess that's part of the healthy and the behavior.
Yeah.
Well, it can actually be a specific strategy to take that time. And I think that during the Zoom fatigue world that we live in, what I'm hearing from, executives and managers and individuals is they're really missing that, that serendipity moment, that hallway chit chat to, when you look at someone and you say, "Hey, you're a bit off. What's going on, man?" Or how can I help?
You're spot on. Yeah, that is that. We are herd animals. We absolutely are. And when we don't get that, we lose something.
What I'm been and I learned this from a global technology network, is they're having these open lunches that once a week they just have an open lunch. They turn the Zoom on and they have lunch, and they just basically shoot the shit and let whatever happen. And I thought that was a brilliantly simple way of creating just some serendipity time. So it's
yeah, I think the intentionality of it is what's different in this COVID environment that would not necessarily be as scripted or as intentional otherwise. And then I also think doing it more than one way. I think the lunch would be a great thing, but it would be so easy for any of us to go, well, we checked that box, so now I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And usually I think it's more than one. I think it's probably 2 or 3 different attempts at providing that connectivity, that spark of creative combustion. So don't get locked in as there's only one way to do it.
Yeah, amen to that. And let's be clear now, Ed, about let's be clear, your book, which you can find on his website, the eppley-group.com. I've also ordered it from Amazon UK, so it's out there and about. So and that has the 6 disciplines of focus management, and is
Focus Management Pros. Yeah, we call it Focus Management Pros.
And can you give us a few words on that? Is that I'm assuming in there's also some jewels for people to snack and skim and read to help them during this crazy time.
Yeah, it's 120 pages of me sharing with the reader what I've learned to be true or not true about managing and leading others. But it's built. I had this desire to write the book for some period of time for a couple of different reasons, but I didn't have the skeleton on which to build it or hang it. And when I got exposed to professional management, it was like, okay, there is the framework. And so then it allowed me to write about what I've experienced or watched others do, either successfully or unsuccessfully, as it relates to each of these 6 disciplines. And it's written very much in a story of when I can speak positively of somebody's efforts to apply one of these principles, I name names and tell them and describe the individual and where they are. When it's not been successful, I use pseudonyms and I protect the guilty by not naming them. But it is funny because I've had a couple of different individuals who are familiar with some of the unsuccessful scenarios come back and say, "I know who you were talking about there," and so it's really not much theory. It's really just about practical experience about how to lead, how to do strategy, or what constitutes good strategy, people development, organization performance, structure, and culture. And I tried to write it as very much something you would want to hand to somebody when they became a manager. And I would want it to be, if somebody was really a successful executive, it would be one of the books you would see on their shelf, and it would be dog-eared. And it's a short read, and it was intended to be, again, eminently practical.
Beautiful. And in there's also the green thumb for growing people. And the reason I pulled that one out is I'm sure I've shared with you in our previous conversations that my mission or purpose is to create experiences that enable growth of people and companies. And the podcast here is really in service to that, creating experience to,
right.
I'm growing, listening to you, and other people are growing and discovering, enjoying this. So can you give me a few words on the green thumb for growing people?
Yeah, it's rooted. Yes, it is rooted in the premise of Drucker's statement that the cost of doing business is going to go up by 3 to 5% annually every year, no matter how hard we try to keep it down. So when we talk about growing people, most people immediately fast forward to elevation in the organizational hierarchy, so that somebody's going to get promoted. Well, the fact is, the vast majority of people don't get promoted. Correct? Year over year, they're not going anywhere other than the job they're in. The other premise that there is in there, when we give somebody a pay raise for cost of living, and they give us no more output year over year than they did the prior year, but we're paying them more, the business just lost money. And if we do that often enough, we go out of business. So my definition of growing people is making them more productive, helping them be more productive. And so year over year, their output has to become greater with the same or less input. So I've developed just a rudimentary formula that skill times effort equals results. If you buy into that premise that skill times effort equals results, there's also a point at which more effort doesn't yield us anything. In fact, it could be counterproductive. So the studies show over and over again, 55 hours more or less, people start to be less productive each incremental hour that they work. So effort no longer becomes a means by which we can get improved results. So it really comes back to skill. And the only thing you could sometimes say, behavior, skill and or behavior times effort equals results. So really the job then of me as a boss, if I want to have a green thumb for development of people, really comes back to what kind of conversations am I having, and how often am I having these conversations to help people know which skills should they improve to be more productive or change, and which behaviors should they do more of or fewer of or less of to likewise get that improvement in results. So there are people who are naturally good at this, but they are not the norm. And again, full disclosure, I was a decent manager because I cared about the people that I managed and lead, but I was making the job much harder. And part of the reason I made the job much harder is if I had to tell you something more than once, then you're stupid. And that's terribly naive and ineffective as a boss. But nonetheless, because of that, if I had to work with you, more than one time on something, there's a point at which I'm going, that this is just easier to do it myself. I may not verbalize it, but that's what's going on up here in this melon head of mine. So that's kind of the things I talk about in people development, is the fears that we have and the frustrations that we have that get in the way of us developing people as much as we could or as we should.
And again, for those listening, the book is just packed with practical wisdom, just like that. It's really kind of hard to argue with. Is it? I'm trying to argue with it, but not really. But it related to that, also on your website, you have an assessment, and I have my assessment results. And
you passed.
I passed. I got an overall 128, which out of an 80%. However, when I dove into it, I was honestly disappointed, or around my people development score, which was 14 out of 20. And it says, you're doing a good job, but there's room for improvement, which is fine. I guess everyone has room for improvement. But what can I do with that now? Because I think I can also maybe go back to the book and dive into that and see if I can brush up on some things. Or where do you go after this assessment? Because it was very easy to do, and it's very easy to read. It's very accessible. So I suggest people go get that. Do
you have the individual questions in your summary, or just the total?
No, just the totals.
We'd have to look at your individual questions, but in fact, let me do one thing. And typically, though, where people struggle in people development is, first of all, do they have a formula for what it looks like to develop someone? And usually we tend to think of the job description. Mm-hmm. We tend to look at duties and activities. And it's either are they doing the activities or not? Well, now we're bleeding into organizational performance. Is it possible for somebody to do all the duties and activities in their job description and still not be successful? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Salesperson can make all the calls, they can do their proposals, they can do literally everything that comes with the job description and still not be successful. So then we have to really get clear about, well, what are the results that we expect from whatever activities somebody does? And it's at that point when you start to articulate what are the results that we expect from the efforts, whatever they are, that you start to get clarity about, well, then what are the skills and behaviors that are most critical for them to be able to achieve that? I'm going to pose a question to you, and you may know the answer. If you've read the book, you may know the answer. If not, don't worry about it if you don't. But when is a manager most willing and able to define the results that someone should produce?
Most willing and able?
Yeah.
I read the book a while ago, and so I do not remember the answer, but I think most managers are most willing, I guess, after the fact. However, my hope would be it would be up front and to actually, and ideally even have, for me, have that dialogue and have a mutual agreement on what success looks like and what stretch success looks like.
And I agree with everything you said, but the harsh reality is most of us are willing and able to fill out and identify what people are not doing when we want to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
I will be really crystal clear that these results are not happening in these 4 areas when you, for some reason, are not delivering what I want. But the ideal time when somebody deserves to know what those are is when we're hiring them. So I'm looking at the questions under people development. My company or department productivity has improved annually for the past 5 years. Well, again, if we're great and we have that green thumb for growing people, then productivity should be rising year over year. Second thing is I routinely give assignments to people who have not previously done the assignments. Well, what kind of work do most managers delegate? They tend to delegate that which does not require time and effort for them to teach others.
Mm-hmm.
Back to this, it's easier to do it myself than it is to teach someone else to do it. So if you're not giving assignments to people who've not previously done it routinely, well, that means you're either hanging on to work because you think you're the only one that can do it, or you don't want to take the time to teach somebody else. I'm fine investing time and money in a person who chooses to leave my company or department. That really gets back to a mindset. Am I okay being a net exporter of talent? And I believe that if we're really good at developing people, we are not afraid for anybody that we've trained and developed to leave and go somewhere else. And in fact, we might even encourage it. And if we're a net exporter of talent by design and by actual strategic intent, we're probably going to be able to maintain hiring people at a somewhat lower cost overall than others who choose not to be exporters of talent.
Because they're going to want to work with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is when openings exist in my company or department, I have at least one qualified internal candidate for every opportunity. And ideally, you should have 2.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm curious because I did this a while ago and I'm wondering what I had in my mind when I was, maybe I'll do it again and see, but I'm going to take this moment, Ed, to start wrapping up and bring some of these themes together. During this crazy Corona time when we're all being impacted, having conversations about how to manage people triggered by these questions that you're posing, I think are tremendous. So I'm really inviting people to, go to Ed's podcast, the Ed Eppley Experience. You can go do the free assessments and also learn more about the book. And if you're really serious to take the next step, then by all means, reach out to Ed and get some guidance and some mirroring there. And the thing I'd like to close with is your invitation to people to intentionally reach out to see how people are doing and check in as a human. That is exactly the message actually that Movember is celebrating, because they're not only busy with physical health, in men's case, mostly, prostate cancer and testicular cancer, but also mental health And I believe, and I know that the mental health, issues, I think across humanity are spiking because of our isolation and different work practices and uncertainty. So I really invite everyone to pick up the phone and call people and have the conversation. Ideally people maybe that you're close with or people that you haven't been in touch with lately. So Ed, thank you for that, I think, very meaningful and profound message. And again, I'm so grateful that you came. Is there any parting message that you would like to share with people before we're wrapping it up?
We have a responsibility to each other to, as often as possible, fill each other's sails, to allow people to go further and faster than they might otherwise. And when I say we have a responsibility, I know some people may take issue with that, but what I mean by that is if you want people to do that for you, the best way to make that happen is to do that for them or do that for others. Most everyone that I know wants to be respected, and there's a technical competency that goes first and foremost to being willing to be respected in the business environment, but there's also the human relations component. And if that's missing, you're not going to be respected at the level you want or you need to be effective. And one of the best ways you can be respected is to fill the sails of others. So that would just be my admonition, my call, my urge to anybody who is listening, is to recognize how much you can get indirectly when you're willing to give. So I certainly see that modeled in all you do, Chris. It's a privilege to be with you and spend time with you. And I'm a big supporter of your effort for simplicity, because there's not nearly enough of it right now in the world. So anything we can do to help people get to that, we're going to be better. Thanks for allowing me to be with you today.
My pleasure. Thanks for filling each other's sails. This has been great. And the Eppley Group, or the Eppley Group. I was going to say the Ed Eppley Group, the EppleyGroup.com, and I'll put links in the show notes for the podcast to his book, his podcast, and his assessment on the website. And you can also find him on LinkedIn. So Ed, thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, Chris. Be well.
Learn more at ebullient.com/podcast.